The Wise Mothman is one of the most exciting and probably the best Sultai-Mill commander to have come out in recent years. This deck provides so many different angles that you can use as a plan of attack, whether it be milling, life loss, or just taking your opponent out in a surprising way. This deck offers it all. I'm so excited to be talking about it today, and with the deck list finally out, we can go over some of the key cards straight out of the box, and that's what I want to do today. I want to give you 5 cards that you need to pay attention to when you're playing your first initial games, and cards that you may want to build around to power up this deck. Now, next week, we're going to be doing a full upgrade guide in the sense of cards to add, avenues to go, and game plans to follow, and that's next week. But today, we're going to be sticking to the deck list. Of course, if you want to see more EDH videos like this, let me know in the comment section down below. Leave a like on the video, and let's hop right into the commander that's been on the screen, the Wise Mothman. 1 green, black, and blue for a Sultai legendary creature, insect mutant, 3/3 with flying, that says whenever the Wise Mothman enters the battlefield or attacks, each player gets a rad counter. And then whenever 1 or more non-land cards are milled, put a 1/1 counter on each of up to X target creatures, where X is the number of non-land cards milled this way. A lot of things happening here. You get rad counters on each player, and each player is key, getting around some hexproof effects, making sure everyone is milling equally. And then also the 1/1 counters boosting up your board, so it's not just about milling. You're going to be creating a hyper-powered board. There's going to be many ways to build around that, but the card that we need to go over second is a rad counter itself. So on the screen, you're going to see this as something that you're going to add counters to for each player, and it says at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, if you have any rad counters, mill that many cards. For each non-land card milled this way, you lose 1 life and a rad counter. Now, this works for everyone, and notice that these counters are going to be going down, so we're going to be looking for ways to increase the amount of counters on this, keep the milling going, and you only lose counters on your rad counters, so you're going to gain counters, your opponent's going to gain counters. That counter only goes down when they mill non-land cards, so we're going to start thinking about pods where our opponents are playing these land decks, these big ramp decks, and we're going to be really able to take advantage of those players that are not really going to be losing a lot of rad counters a lot, taking advantage of them, making them lose life. There's so many different angles that we can take this, so let's hop right into it with the first card that I think you should be paying attention to, and that's going to be Radstorm. Now, this card has everyone a little, I guess, nervous. It's a really cool card. Anything with Storm is obviously just going to have people concerned, and for constructed implications, anything with Storm has some eyes popping. What can people use to do and take advantage of this? So proliferate along with the Storm. So you're going to be able to proliferate a lot of times. So in early game situations, there are going to be times where your opponent plays out a bunch of spells, or you let the group hug player help everyone out a little bit too much, and then with the stack or a storm count being so large, Radstorm is then just going to be able to boost up your board, increase the 1/1 counters on there, increase the amount of infect counters on someone else, or just increase the amount of rad counters. And outside of just increasing the amount of rad and then getting your opponents to lose more life, which is going to be a great way to stop some of those life gain decks that really just get a little bit too far, this is just going to manage and temper down some of that passive life gain that happens in the format. Well, we're going to take advantage of cards like Prologue to Phyresis as well. Now, your opponents are going to hit you for this one. Your group will absolutely hit you for this one, but why don't you just play this as a one-of and then have a bunch of proliferate effects and go wild with it and just say, hey, this isn't a win condition, but if y'all ain't gonna beat me, then I'm gonna beat you with this. You get to draw a card, it replaces itself, it's a freebie. Take advantage of the proliferating that you're already gonna be putting into this deck to make sure rad counters continue to stay on your opponents. I'm telling you, take advantage of stuff like this. Radstorm, Prologue to Phyresis is very important to this strategy. The next card that I want to talk about is Raul Troubleshooter, 1 blue black for a 1/4 legendary creature, zombie mutant rogue. It says during your turns, once during each of your turns, I should say, you may cast a spell from among the cards in your graveyard that were milled this turn. You can cast cards from among your graveyard, not your opponent's stuff, but then you can tap it and it says each player mills a card. Again, I am the big fan of this. Each player mills a card, getting around certain hexproof effects, protection effects. Each player is going to be losing some cards, but then you are going to be the one casting your own stuff, and that's how you're going to power out your cards. It's very important to make sure that the cards you mill are going to be as powerful as they can be for your own cards, taking advantage of your own rad counters as well. That's what this does. It's not the cards you milled with this card. It is the cards you milled this turn, and you can do that once a turn, not on your opponent's turns. Fine, they try to make this one fair as a legendary creature, but it's a pretty cool legendary by itself. And how you want to take advantage of this is with cards like Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, and specifically with the shuffle effect. I'm not saying that you need to go to 15 mana to cast this, but playing some shuffle effects where you are going to be milling yourself out a lot. You are going to be taking advantage of a lot of your own cards, but you want to make sure you can reuse them over and over again. But eventually these shuffle effects you may want to cast, right? So if you have the ability to put in cards that allow you to cast spells at instant speed. And with the trigger on the stack, you did mill this card over in response to a shuffle effect. You can play it and take advantage of it, stuff like that. These are the type of surprise factors that your opponent's not going to be aware of. They're expecting cards to be cast at instant speed from your hand, and then maybe a spell or two, but a shuffle effect, an Emrakul out of the graveyard at instant speed, an Ulamog, a Kozilek, whatever it might be. Effects like this are going to be fantastic. You have the level 1 understanding of casting instant, sorcery, creature, whatever. Cast something massive like that. Make your graveyard an extension of your hand when you're playing a deck like this. The next card I want to talk about is the Glowing One. Green 2 for a 2/2 creature zombie mutant with Death Touch that says whenever Glowing One deals combat damage to a player, they get 4 rad counters. Whenever a player mills a non-land card, you gain 1 life. And that's what's fantastic about this. So the Death Touch, great, it's a blocker. But when you get in for some combat damage, they gain 4 rad counters. That opponent is going to get a huge swing in rad counters, getting them to mill more. And there's so many other synergies with this being a zombie and dealing combat damage that we're going to go over in our upgrade guide, so I won't touch on it here. But also, when a player mills a non-land card, this is any time. They could mill it themselves. You could mill it. You could mill it at any point in the turns, your turns, their turns, whatever. As long as this is out on the battlefield, this is a way for you to gain life and get rid of the downside of the rad counters for you. You can mill it with your commander. You can mill it with other mill effects, with instant sorceries, planeswalkers. And on that note, I want to talk about planeswalkers like Ashiok Dream Render, which is going to be a great card in this deck. And I'm already cheating here, providing you with some upgrades, but Ashiok is just too good not to mention here, because firstly, you have that prison effect of your opponents can't search their library for anything. So tutors out of the way. They can't search for ways to stop you here. But then target player is going to mill the top 4 cards of the library into their graveyard, and then each opponent exiles a graveyard. You can mill yourself, maybe enable your Raul, cast some other spells, and then your opponents exile their graveyard. It's a no-brainer. Play the Glowing One. It is such a sweet permanent, and it was a really cool build around. I'm definitely looking to create copies of this card, find other versions of this card. This card is so good if it can stay around for a couple of cycles, heck, even a 1-turn cycle with some milling. But the second last card that I want to talk about is going to be Nuclear Fallout. This card is black X for a sorcery that says each creature gets twice -X/-X until end of turn. Each player gets X rad counters. Firstly, it's a board wipe that gets around indestructible. Fantastic. It also is great for your mana sinks. We're going to talk about some mana sinks in the upgrade guide, so I highly recommend you stick around to check that video coming out next week. There's so many good ways to get mana and put it into a board wipe like this, and then each player gets X rad counters. Those rad counters, by the way, they trigger on your first pre-combat main phase. So by the time you cast this, the beginning of your pre-combat main phase has already happened. You will board wipe, your opponents will get the rad counters, their board's gone, they're going to mill with the rad counters and then pass, and then you're good. This is just a fantastic board wipe. Works on theme with the deck, works on theme with your plan. You're going to play it, you're going to sink mana into it. It's just a fantastic card. But the last card is with the Master of All Cunning, the Master Transcendent. 1 black, green, blue for a legendary artifact creature mutant 2/4 that says when the Master Transcendent enters the battlefield, target player gets 2 rad counters. And it also has a second ability, tap, put target creature card in a graveyard that was milled this turn onto the battlefield under your control. It's a green mutant with base power and toughness 3/3. It loses other colors and creature type. Don't want to be doing too many creature shenanigans with this. At the beginning of the video, I was talking about some of the cards that we have that have zombie shenanigans and types like that, so just be aware of that. If you do have a zombie sub theme, which I think this deck should have, you might lose some of that with anti-synergy with this, turning into mutants, losing the zombie type. But that's okay. Well, you are getting the free reanimation out of this, let alone the fact that if you have this out, it's a great flicker target to just be bouncing it all over the field. It's not an attack triggers. Heck, play a card that's in green that's really good right now. Concordant Crossroads, just all creatures have haste. Yes, your opponent's creatures are going to have haste, but something like this is going to be a great way to take advantage of the Master Concordant. And also, I mean, if you look back at the Wise Mothman, the Wise Mothman has an attack trigger, not only an ETB. So Concordant Crossroads, it's probably just going to be a staple in this deck anyway. Master Transcendent is just going to be a great reanimation effect. You need to take advantage of your opponent's graveyards as well. Most EDH decks do these days. They have flashback cards. They have just big creatures that they want to reanimate in general. Graveyards are just half extensions of people's hand. Take advantage of that. Your opponent's graveyards to be extensions of your hands, your game plan, and your way to win the game. Card like Master Transcendent, reanimating everything. Now, those are the cards that I generally want to talk about. Those are the cards that I think are worth building around in this deck. Let me know what you think about the Wise Mothman list out of the box. Are you looking to pick this deck list up? What are the cards you're looking to put in this deck? I'd love to hear your comments down below, because I'm looking to build this deck. I'm really excited for some of the secret synergies or ideas that you might have. I'd love to hear about it.